This video is sponsored by HelloFresh. Food. We all need it, but do we really have any idea what we're doing? The other day, I'm pretty sure I ate nothing other than pizza, and I wonder why I have trouble with energy. Not to mention, most of us are out in the world eating out every meal, and that's not easy on your health or your wallet. But fortunately for people like me, HelloFresh is the hero we need. They deliver healthy, less than a week old, farm-fresh ingredients alongside extremely easy to follow recipes in a box to your door so that you can whip up some pretty awesome meals. All of which are healthier for you, more affordable than daily fast food, and much quicker and less stressful than shopping at a grocery store. They were kind enough to send me pork tostadas, onion crunch chicken, and firecracker meatballs, all of which I have cooked and enjoyed, but my favorite was the meatballs because beef is my first love. And listen, not to humble brag, but do you see how professional I look in these shots? I mean, damn, I look like a chef or something, and I'm just a video game guy. With their easy to follow recipes and instructions, if I can do it, literally anybody can. It's foolproof and delicious, and their meals are fully customizable, from selecting different dietary options like carb-friendly or vegetarian to swapping proteins and sides, and I could rattle on, but I'll just skip to the best part. If you go to HelloFresh.com, use the code BanditGames65 for 65% off plus free shipping. Yeah, save yourself even more money and time and get yourself healthy no matter your dietary needs. Do it. You'll thank me later. And now on to the video. A Zelda game without Ganon is actually kind of typical, which is pretty weird to think about, because even though technically speaking Ganon is the original Zelda villain from a real-life perspective, he's not the original villain when it comes to in-game lore, and he's only present in like half of the games. But that aside, clearly Ganon is the most recognizable Zelda villain of them all, and one of the most well-known in gaming as a whole, not only due to the fact that he did originate from the first game in the 80s, but also because he's just plain cool, and ironically is one of the famous Chosen 3 who received the power of the Triforce at several different points in the series. This depth makes him stand out as a unique villain, and in this video I'm going to explain the lore behind every appearance of Ganon throughout the series. Oh, and spoiler alert, obviously. The first things that I'm going to tackle are a couple of burning questions that some of you no doubt have. The first of which would be, what is the difference, if any, between Ganon and Ganondorf? What a great question, I'm so glad you asked. Ganondorf, although not present in the series until the 5th game in the franchise, Ocarina of Time, actually comes before Ganon as far as lore is concerned. What I mean by that is that Ganondorf the Gerudo human being was first and then transformed into Ganon via the power of the Triforce of Power. Now this is slightly theoretical and you're more than welcome to disagree with me because of that, as is your prerogative when discussing things not directly confirmed in-game, but my understanding is that Ganon is the demonic beast form that Ganondorf transforms into when augmented by a great power source, such as the Triforce or the Twilight or Malice, and this explanation for Ganon's existence is what I'll be branching off of for the entirety of this video. The second burning question that you may have is, what do I mean every Ganon in the series? Isn't there just one? Well, yes, but also no. Most Ganons are actually the same, yes, just split up by different timelines and appear differently depending on multiple different factors. However, one Ganon in particular is actually a straight-up reincarnation, and therefore another Ganon entirely. You see, in the child timeline, which we'll get back to at some point later in the video, Ganondorf is killed, straight up. But then another Ganondorf is born at some point in the future and eventually transforms into another Ganon and subsequently gets sealed away at the end of Four Swords Adventures. That being said, each appearance, whether the same Ganon/Dorf or not, will be covered in full detail, so just hang tight. The last question to tackle before getting into the nitty-gritty would be the question of whether or not Ganon is the literal reincarnation of Demise's hatred, which, as many people will remember, is the beginning of the seemingly endless cycle of good versus evil that we see happen in every Zelda game. My answer to that is no. Ganon is not the literal incarnation of Demise's hatred, at least not directly. He's more of a byproduct. See, a lot of people, including me formerly, assume that Ganon is the demon that Demise's eternal hatred manifests as, but that explanation doesn't allow for the existence of other demon kings and lords, such as Malladus or Majora, which also embody the hatred of Demise. Instead, I now believe that Demise simply cursed his hatred into a reincarnating existence in the exact same way that Link, or the spirit of the hero, reincarnates. And similarly to the spirit of the hero, will always reincarnate as an individual that may then become augmented and turn into a demon. This automatically explains every major demon and every major antagonist, such as Vati or Ganondorf or the other Ganondorf, because once one of them dies, another will eventually reincarnate due to the curse, just like another Link will eventually reincarnate due to the blessing, if you will. Yet another similarity and parallelism between Hylia and demise, but that's enough talking about not Ganon in Ganon's own video, so let's move on. According to prophecy that was set in place an unknown time ago by forces currently unknowable, the desert-dwelling Gerudo people give birth to a male child only once every 100 years, and once of age, that boy is by default to become the king of the Gerudo. This was the age-old custom of the Gerudo until one particular boy was born and crowned king, and his name was Ganondorf. He was born long ago, before the events of Ocarina of Time, and is introduced to us in-game as the Gerudo king who apparently swore allegiance to the king of Hyrule. However, as Zelda correctly predicted, this allegiance was fake, and Ganondorf's true intent was to find and seize the Triforce for himself, which was under the protection of the royal family of Hyrule. And that's the only backstory to Ganondorf that we had all the way until his appearance in the Wind Waker, when we finally were able to realize the deeper reasoning behind his actions, which, put simply, he did out of jealousy. As the ruler of the Gerudo, he knew firsthand of all the hardships that come with living in the desert, and he wanted the land of Hyrule for his own because of this. However, instead of acting nobly and perhaps collaborating somehow with the king of Hyrule to alleviate the harsh living conditions of his people, he instead sought to usurp the throne of Hyrule forcefully and take its omnipotent Triforce for his own. No matter his reasoning though, he eventually did discover the Triforce and upon attempting to touch it, split it apart into the three pieces of power, wisdom, and courage, which rested within Ganondorf, Zelda, and Link respectively. For 7 long years he searched for the other two pieces while sitting atop his stolen throne of Hyrule, and eventually Link brings both himself and Zelda to Ganondorf's front door. After being defeated by Link in combat, Ganondorf calls upon the power of the Triforce of power within him and transforms into a hideous demon, introducing the world to the monster known as Ganon, the effects and legacy of which we have yet to escape to this day. It's also worth mentioning that ever since Ganondorf's reign over the Gerudo and transformation into the Demon King Ganon, the Gerudo people have officially sworn off all males, assumedly including their own. It's confirmed that there have been no kings since Ganondorf, but it's unknown as to whether or not there have still been other Gerudo men born. But back to Ganon. As a side note, for what it's worth, I think that Phantom Ganons are named Phantom Ganon instead of Phantom Ganondorf, even though they directly look like Ganondorf instead of Ganon, because Ganon is also the term we use for magical doppelgangers of Ganondorf, if you will. That's really neither here nor there, but I just wanted to take a moment and explain my thought process since technically Phantom Ganons are, you know, Ganons, at least in name. But back to Ganon. As you know, following the events of Ocarina of Time, the timeline splits into 3 separate ones. The adult, which follows the events pictured here, the child, which follows the events pictured here, and the fallen, which follows events we don't see actually, since it's more of an alternate reality where Ganon manages to defeat Link. In each of these timelines, we see Ganon again, but notably in vastly different appearances. In the adult timeline, he appears again as a puppet, something unable to move on its own. In the child timeline, he appears as a 4-legged beast and is the only time he appears this way in the entire series aside from Breath of the Wild. And in the fallen timeline, he appears similarly to his original Ocarina of Time appearance as a 2-legged humanoid pig-man monster thing. Now, I happen to believe that the differing appearances are no coincidence at all, and allow me to explain. In the first place, I don't think the Ganon transformation is reversible, at least the Ganon that Ganondorf transforms into. I think the only times we see Ganondorf transform into Ganon and then back into Ganondorf are specifically occasions where Link is able to kill Ganon, such as at the end of Ocarina of Time or Twilight Princess. In both of these circumstances, Ganondorf still had the Triforce of Power in his possession, which likely prevented him from completely dying after Link does something like this. Now, I know some of you will immediately think about the ending scene of Twilight Princess where Ganondorf, still having the Triforce of Power inside him, still ends up dying, but I've already concocted an entire theory about that subject exactly, which I will not explain here for lack of time. So if you're interested, check out my video on that exact subject, which will be linked below. Anyway, if we think about it this way, as in if Ganon is a permanent transformation unless defeated, this would automatically explain each differing appearance. Puppet Ganon from Wind Waker strangely appears as a lifeless puppet, and after being defeated, it's revealed that it truly was not Ganondorf after all, and in fact, the real Ganondorf had been chilling on top of the giant chandelier thing, controlling Puppet Ganon the whole time. So let's imagine for a moment that since Wind Waker takes place after the events at the end of Ocarina of Time in the adult timeline where Link kills Ganon, that form can no longer be transformed into. Because of this, Ganondorf, who has been making several Phantom Ganons in the game, creates a final Phantom Ganon that transforms into Puppet Ganon, which Ganondorf controls directly instead of actually transforming into it himself. By contrast, in the child timeline, which takes place before Ganondorf was ever able to transform into Ganon in the first place, at the end, the Gerudo King calls upon the power of the Twilight to accomplish several things such as possessing Princess Zelda, and after being squeezed out of her, transforming into Dark Beast Ganon, which by the way is the only other four-legged Ganon aside from the Ganon in Breath of the Wild who's also referred to as the Dark Beast Ganon, almost as if to imply that they are different transformations because they transformed due to different power sources, Twilight and Malice. And the reason he transformed into more of a beast in Twilight Princess is, in my opinion, the same reason that Link transforms into a wolf in the same game. It's due to the exposure to Twilight. Since both Link and Ganondorf have Triforces in their systems, and Link transforms into a wolf if exposed, why not Ganondorf into a wolf-pig thing? And after his defeat as Ganon, he de-transforms into a ball of pure energy, does battle with Midna, then appears in Hyrule Field as Ganondorf once again, with Dark Beast Ganon dead and gone at this point, never to be seen again. Later on in the timeline, following Ganondorf's death at the end of Twilight Princess, another Ganondorf is born, and I know Four Swords Adventures lore is kind of messy because of this, but hey, it's canon and it's on the timeline right here, so it's got to have some sort of explanation, which is that Demise's hatred once again reincarnates as another Ganondorf, but this time he transforms into Ganon via unknown means. It can be assumed though that he transformed because he obtained the Trident, but like I said, it's unclear since you really don't see Ganon or Ganondorf at all in the game and the Triforce is nowhere to be seen. Anyway, in the alternate reality called the Fallen Timeline, Ganondorf transforms into Ganon but is actually able to kill Link. However, due to Link having already awakened the sages and according to the intro of A Link to the Past, Ganon was stopped by the sages aka the Wise Men and sealed away within the Sacred Realm, along with the full Triforce, which implies that he also retrieved the Triforce of Wisdom from Zelda following Link's death. Well, actually that bit right there is a little bit of a headcanon from me. What A Link to the Past actually says happened is Ganondorf just straight up murdered all his minions so that he alone could enter the Sacred Realm and grab the Triforce for himself, successfully wishing upon it to rule the world and corrupting the Sacred Realm into the Dark World. It's a bit contradictory though in several places, since it says that Ganondorf actually was able to wish upon the Triforce, which means that for some reason the Triforce wish worked instead of splitting apart like it did when he tried to wish upon it in Ocarina of Time, and also it implies the door to the Sacred Realm was open and that Ganondorf then transformed into Ganon inside the realm and was sealed within it. If this were true, then Link would have still woken up 7 years later since he was asleep at this time and likely would have, done something about the situation. Since it literally is contradictory and actually seems to reference events not linked to Ocarina of Time, I choose to personally explain the Fallen Timeline as Link being eliminated at the final battle of Ocarina of Time and then the events that A Link to the Past happens afterwards. But you can believe whatever you wish as it ultimately doesn't matter much for explaining the existence of Ganon. The point is, his Triforce powered transformation was into a two-legged humanoid pig monster. When he's defeated for the first time at the end of A Link to the Past, the Triforce is not present within him, so he actually does die completely. He's halfway resurrected again in the events of the Oracle games via his surrogate mother's twin Rova, although the resurrection is interrupted by Link and only a mindless Ganon is revived and subsequently killed. Later on in A Link Between Worlds, Yuga specifically harnesses the power of the Seven Maidens, who are the descendants of the Wise Men, aka the Sages, to resurrect and transform into Ganon, or in this case, Yuga Ganon, and of course is killed once again by the hero of Hyrule. And once again, later on in the timeline prior to the events of the original Legend of Zelda game, Ganon is once again revived by his lingering followers and leads an assault against Hyrule in order to obtain the Triforce of Wisdom, which Zelda has broken and scattered across the land preemptively. Ganon is once again killed by Link and technically revived again in the next game, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, if Link dies. That's a big if though, but I mean, hey, maybe it spawns another Fallen Timeline off of the Fallen Timeline. So the Fallen Timeline. Yeah. That makes sense. With Ganon's many different appearances throughout the timelines explained, it's time to talk about his latest appearances as Calamity Ganon and Dark Beast Ganon in Breath of the Wild. Right off the bat, and trust me, I'm not copying out of explaining it, I'm just avoiding full-on speculation by admitting that it's hard to explain the specifics of Ganon's appearance here, due to Breath of the Wild not officially connecting to any one of the previous timelines. And of course theories can be made, but this is not a timeline theory video, so I digress. The one thing that carries over across all the timelines though is the hatred of demise. And what I can say is that by the time of Breath of the Wild, Ganon is more of an idea than an actual being that resurfaces eternally, sometimes spanning 10,000 years in between appearances, and that both Calamity Ganon and Dark Beast Ganon and heck even the Blight Ganons are all made of the same goopy evil substance referred to as Malice, none of which are actual transformations of Ganondorf like the other Ganons from the timelines, but rather are puppets, if you will, or perhaps phantoms that are all manifesting outside Ganondorf's corpse. He's been able to make Phantom Ganons before, but it always used to be either due to Gerudo Dark Magic or the power of the Triforce of Power. So the real question we should be asking is, what is Malice specifically and where does it come from? I know people will immediately say that Malice as a substance has ties way back to Skyward Sword, in that it's heavily implied that that's what monsters are made out of in that game. But Ganondorf's not a monster, right? He's human. Or he was at some point, so where did the malice come from? Well, with Tears of the Kingdom right around the corner, I think this very question is about to get an answer, and therefore Calamity Ganon will finally be fully explained. We already know that it looks like malice is coming from Ganondorf's corpse, but again, he didn't used to ooze reddish-purple jelly out of his chest, so something must have changed. Maybe an old foe is returning from their eternal slumber and needs a physical body to possess. But before we dive headfirst into Speculation Station, I'm gonna go ahead and pump the brakes there. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed the video or at least my efforts into making it, please consider leaving a like as it helps the video performance greatly. And subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, because really, if you're still here, you should be subscribed. You like my videos, admit it. And I'll admit I like having you here too. Also, if you're planning on picking up the game, you'll want to be here, trust me, and you can always unsub later. Huge thanks as always to my Bandit crew, of which I have the name of Minduino to introduce. You're all so wonderful, and Bandit loves you very much. That's all for this one, so be sure to follow me on my socials, and I'll see you next time. This is Bandit, signing out. Peace!